All right, we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are here live for part 2 of this very special 2-part series on enlightened relationships with Amoda Maa and Kavi. If you do not know Amoda Maa and Kavi, Amoda Maa is a spiritual teacher, author, and speaker, and her husband Kavi has been working by her side for many years and is also a musician and a poet. So thank you both so much for being here with us today. We are so honored to have you with us to share your wisdom and your hearts with us all.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Sadie.
Thank you so much. So last week we spoke about relationship as a doorway to awakening, where we dove deep into the heart of awakening through relationship. If you missed that and you're watching this, please see the link of that in the description. However, we would definitely suggest just to stay with us for this live stream, as it's a unique opportunity we have to be here with Amoda Maa and Kavi live today. So definitely would recommend taking a look at that after, but stay live with us if you can. So we'll also be taking questions during this live stream. So if you have any, just feel free to write those in the comments, and then we'll do our best to go through them as much as we can during the live stream. So this week, Amoda Maa and Kavi will be sharing with us about the flowering of love in the world, the true purpose of relationship. We're so looking forward to hearing everything. Thank you both again so much, and welcome. We'd love to hear everything about this flowering of love in the world.
So let me start. The impulse for relationship is often not a conscious one. It's one that we, in some ways, take for granted. And that's fine, because it's a natural impulse of the human experience, of course. And there's the biological impulse, the impulse that's driven by hormones and drives the biological need for procreation and survival of the species. And then there's the psychological impulse that is often, not often, that is always overlaid on that, which is the psychological need for relationship. And that's the part that I'm really referring to, is remaining unconscious. And again, that's fine. It's part of the human experience. It's part of our humanity. But if we're talking about a deeper dimension of relationship, if we're talking about the possibility of relationship to be a doorway to awakening, and particularly if we're speaking about the possibility of a new paradigm in the world, not just for relationship, but for all relationships, not just intimate relationship, but all relationships, how we relate to the world, and the flowering of love, as opposed to the flowering, well, not, I wouldn't call it the flowering, but the the manifestation of ego, ego consciousness, which is the main manifestation that we see. But if we're looking at the possibility of a new paradigm of living and being, which is very possible, and hopefully is beginning to emerge and reveal itself, then the deeper purpose of relationship can be brought to light. And primarily it's the inclusion of the motivation for a relationship. What drives the impulse for relationship? What drives us to look for relationship? In other words, what are we looking for? What are we wanting? What are we needing, and why? If that can be included in our, let's say, personal journey of inquiry, which is what the true spiritual journey is, is not the amassing of different techniques and so on, but rather a deep dive into an inner inquiry, which essentially is, who am I? You know, what am I? Am I who I think I am? All the identities and roles that I identify myself as, or am I something deeper than that? So it's looking at a deeper dimension. So this is an investigation. So relationship can be included in that. When it's unconscious, if you like, it's driven by the need for comfort or the need for companionship, which is the same thing, the need for being taken care of, security, the need for some idea of safety, the need for pleasure and some kind of gratification, or it's driven by the need for social status, to be included, to belong, and so on. And so when this impulse for the need for relationship, the need to be loved, the need to belong, the need to be approved of, the need to be taken care of, or the need for companionship, not to be lonely, the need to be fulfilled, the need to be completed by another. When we operate from that unconscious motivating force, that impulse, then essentially, and there's two people coming together in this way, essentially we're meeting each other from the personhood. Yeah, we're meeting each other from who we think we are, not from who we really are. We're meeting each other from roles. So the relationship starts to mold itself around two roles, either the role of the pleaser or the role of the caretaker or the role of the needy one or the role of the wounded one or the role of the powerful one or the role of the one in authority. And so we have this play of roles, and there's no true meeting in that. It can be satisfying for a while, it can be blissful for a while, and it can be satisfying for maybe quite a long time, but then relationship stays in that, and that's what we know as relationship. That describes the world. If we're like-minded, then we agree with each other, and then we can be happy, or we can compromise and come to a happy, balance or compromise in that. Then relationship can continue. If we're attached to our roles, then we can remain in some ways satisfied in that. But when those roles clash, when the needs clash, when the expectations clash, when a deeper dimension of fulfillment is not available, then we have the drama of relationship, the battle of relationships. We have two personhoods attempting to agree with each other. And then when we have perhaps a more conscious relationship, two conscious or two spiritual people coming together, usually it's a meeting of like values. Yeah, we have the same kind of values with the same kind of beliefs, the same kind of maybe just lifestyle, ways of living, and that can be very compatible. But even in that, it's still a meeting of two personhoods. The deeper purpose of relationship that gives birth to real love, a love that isn't to do with I love you because you agree with me, or I love you because you approve of me, or I love you because you give me what I want and what I need, and vice versa. A love that isn't owned by the personhood. Yeah. In order for that deeper dimension of love, which we'll talk about what the ramifications are of that in relationship and in the world, but in order for that deeper dimension of love to flower, because that's what it is, it's like a flower that opens its petals organically when it's not two personhoods that are meeting, when we've either come to embody our innate wholeness, so there's no need for anyone to make us whole, to complete us. When we've come to know our true nature, not as this personhood, this role that I play, or this identity that I have, or this personality that I have that expresses itself, but rather I've come to know myself as beingness. As beingness. And beingness is not personal. It's our essential nature. It's our essential, the foundation of who we are, our innermost beingness. When we come to know ourselves as that, and two people meet as beingnesses, from beingness, then there's a possibility for the battle to end because it's not a relationship of agreement or compromise or disagreement. There's no enemy in it. We come to experience relationship or relating with another as beingness dancing through form, dancing through duality, the one beingness, the one consciousness, which doesn't belong to me and it doesn't belong to you. It's the fabric of who we are. It's the fabric of everything that we are, everything that we experience, everything that we perceive, everything that exists. When we come to really know that, because we've been on a journey of inner inquiry, or something has fundamentally opened in us, so that the structures of the self and the roles and the identities come tumbling down, then we come to experience the one dancing in the two. And in that, essentially, there's no you and me anymore. There's no you and me. There's just the one meeting itself through this seeming dance of polarity, dance of duality. Now, I know that sounds kind of perhaps a little, I wouldn't say cosmic, but inaccessible, but it's actually very palpable. It's very accessible. It's very real, and it's very ordinary. Yeah, the human experience continues, but something fundamentally changes. So we meet in silence. That doesn't mean we don't speak to each other. It means that there's silence within. We're not coming from, I need you to conform to an image. I don't need you to be a certain way in order for love to be here. It's a love that doesn't have any personhood in it. It's a love that is, if you like, impersonal, but absolutely intimate. Yeah, it's the. I'll probably pause here and see what else comes, but I just want to say it's the root of forgiveness. It's the root of forgiveness because there's no enemy in it. The other is not an enemy. The root of forgiveness, it's the root of kindness, it's the root of tenderness. We don't listen, we're not looking at the personhood, we're not judging the personhood. We're meeting from a deeper dimension of being, where the personhood in some ways is not the issue. Yeah, it goes beyond liking and disliking.
Are you going to expect me to follow that?
I am, my love.
Yeah, I'm always cast into the tough jobs. However, there's always something to say, and I don't want to just throw poetry out willy-nilly, but there is something that that I wrote that kind of alludes to this and speaks to it somewhat. So let me read this and then see where we go from that. It's called The Higher Purpose. At some point, it stops being about problem solving or about two eyes meeting to battle, negotiate, or resolve. It becomes a creative, open, and free meeting of two silences, two wide open hearts without personal agenda, both in service to something more, something higher and deeper. It becomes service to love itself, not personal love, although that may be included, but love as a state of being, love as an emanation of freedom and possibility. When relationship is free from its argument and ownership, it becomes something new, something universal. It is free to soar into the heavens and dive into the depths. We are always called to serve something, and when that something becomes love, it does something in the world, something big or something small, but always something true.
Great, well, that sums it up.
So maybe we can leave now. So I mean, one of my points, I think, because last week I know that I ended on an emphatic kind of statement that had followed us all through that meeting, which was that the primary is awakening, and the primary is awakening. And so what Amoda's talking about really is the fact that this relationship has awakened. The two individuations within it have awakened to something, something deeper. And the I has almost faded into the background. It's still there because it's functioning, but it's faded into the background and is no longer the driver of the engine, either in self or in relationship. And that's what makes us so excited about it. Is it unusual? It probably is unusual. That's not to claim anything, pompous about it or pedestaling about it. It just seems that this configuration has moved us in this direction where she first, many, many years ago, had her awakening and stuff. And then as a wave has come along in my life, so in the last 3-4 years, the same thing has happened to me. And in that dissolvement, we've met even deeper and even more open. It had that quality anyway. It wasn't a struggle in that sense. So we've always had that quality in this relationship. But now it's like the third body, if you like, that two silences could create, which I call love, has a kind of eminent power in the world, hidden. Not power in the sense that we're used to this sense of power, which is always power over things or force, but a hidden frequency, a hidden fragrance that starts to spread out wherever it goes. So, and it's very ordinary.
And the thing is, it's not just an intimate relationship. It starts there. It starts there because that's where the fertile soil is. But it's in all interactions, in all interactions. So in meeting others that, just anybody, people that we come across, or people, of course, people are always interacting with each other, whether we're going to the store or going to wherever we go, or so it's always it's like there's or the people that we work with in the teaching that come to events. It's not the person it's not the person on the surface that is being related to. Of course that's included, because the interaction is intimate, and it's not cold and detached, it's very intimate. But when listening to people, and even strangers, it's not listening to their opinions, it's not listening to their preferences, it's not listening to the personality quirks or the personality flaws, and not listening to their woundedness, and not listening to their pomposity, or it's not on that level. It's actually listening to beingness, to that which is inside that. And that's just natural, because that's just what's happened here. So there's a deeper meeting that happens. That doesn't mean that we have to be best friends. It doesn't mean that we have to fall in love with them or marry them or bring them home with us. It doesn't mean that we like them or dislike them, but we feel and listen from the inside to the inside. And that changes even that momentary interaction. Yeah, whether it's a casual interaction or whether it's a deeper interaction through the teaching, it just changes it. So it's a meeting place, and it's a very natural place to meet. It's just that we're all so or have been so conditioned to meet from our personhood, yeah, from the persona that we carry, from the roles that we play, from our defense structures, from our opinions, from our likes and so on, and dislikes. So this radically changes everything. It actually makes for a peaceful world. Yeah, it makes for a peaceful relationship. And there's nothing suppressed in it. We're not suppressing anything. We're not suppressing our feelings or our truth. There's nothing detached in it. To the complete contrary, it's completely intimate. There's only one being here. There's only one being. The other is myself, yeah, and vice versa. And so there's the utmost tenderness in that.
Yes, even though it sounds kind of small and innocuous, this, that relationship of two silences is rooted and grounded in a deep kindness. Kindness is a malaligned, is a misaligned kind of idea. Kindness inherent in recognizing that the other is yourself and you are the other. There is no separation except for the surface illusory state of what we experience manifested. But to stay rooted in the silence of being, and to have the capacity to do that, there is a perennial abiding state of kindness, both to each other and from each other and from the relationship to the world itself. It's a healer. It becomes a healing energy. And so that I mean, can you conceive of that, in the possibilities of that? I mean, the possibilities of being rooted in that kind of kindness anyway. I'm a big believer in kindness. My poetry is all about kindness because I've discovered that it's extraordinarily powerful, both kindness to self, kindness to the other, kindness to the world, kindness to everything, and not superficial kindness, but this kindness that recognizes itself in the other and the other in itself has the power to change things radically. It's radical kindness, and that's what becomes the abiding state when two silences, when two openness is meet.
And when you meet the world from that silence, from that undivided state, then there's peace in the world. So this just radiates out and out. So that's the flowering of love. Yeah, that's the flowering of love.
And it's not, it's not as if, we're exclusively saying that you have to be in some kind of really special relationship in order to practice, discover, find, or experience kindness. Kindness is inherent really in the awakening journey. To me, it's embedded in it that eventually, if you fall in and in and in, you end up being faced with the fact that kindness is the only alternative. If you want peace, you have to be kind, otherwise it's not peace, it's not true peace. And so that can be the starting point for anybody, because you can practice kindness or you can be kind. It's not a practice. You can be kind despite your the sound of your own radio waves in your mind, you can be kind. You can be kind when you go to the store, to the idiot who's cut you up on the freeway, to any single person. You can be kind. It has that quality. You know say?
So yeah, and you see, fundamental, the thing that cuts through all problems, all perceptions of an enemy, whether that enemy is the other half in the relationship, or whether the enemy is the person on the street that you've taken a dislike to, or whatever, or somebody in your family, or a friend you disagree with. The thing that cuts through all that is the fundamental realization that there is only one consciousness, one totality, giving birth, or rather not giving birth to, but manifesting as the birth of many forms. So if we believe in an unexamined, uninvestigated, unconscious way that there are many different forms, separate forms in the world, and some of those forms I like, and some of those forms I don't like, and the ones I like I'm okay with, and the ones I don't like I'm going to fight or disagree with or try to reject, and so on, which is the divided state of the world that we see. If you believe that there are fundamentally 7 billion separate forms in this world, all coming from a different source, perhaps, and therefore fundamentally different to me, and therefore fundamentally a threat to me, or very possibly a threat to me, then the self will always protect itself, not just physically, I'm talking psychologically. Everything will be seen, everything other than me will be seen to be a threat to me, psychologically, I'm not talking about somebody coming at you with a knife or so on. Of course, you have to functionally protect yourself. I'm talking about a psychological threat. Somebody says something that triggers you. Somebody says something that you don't agree with. Somebody says something that you find abrasive. Somebody says something that you just don't like. It's an opposition to something that you think you are. Then you will protect yourself psychologically. That psychological protection are the myriad strategies and structures that we erect around our minds and around our hearts to prevent ourselves from being open, present, and essentially vulnerable. I don't mean vulnerable again physically, I mean or in a weak way, but vulnerable in the sense of intimacy, truly just meeting what is here without trying to psychologically protect me. If that is our fundamental way of seeing things, our belief, because it is unexamined, then we have a world of division, we have a world of animosity, we have a world of violence, we have a world of terror, and we have a world of awe. But if we change our perception, not just intellectually or ideologically, but actually by going in and in and in on a journey of inquiry, living internal inquiry. Who am I? What am I? Am I who I think I am? Is this a psychological construct created by my training, my conditioning? Who am I really? How can I come to know myself? Not myself as a separate entity or as a personhood, but the nature of who I am. Then awareness can have an opportunity to fall back into awareness and realize itself as the fabric of who I am and the fabric of everything. That there is only one consciousness, one awareness, one totality, one beingness. You can't divide beingness or being into many little beingnesses. There's only one being, and in that we are not only connected, but we are one, essentially one and the same. We're not connected because connection means they're separate entities connecting with each other. In beingness, when you fall to that over and over again, and you come to know that as your true nature, there is only one beingness. We are one in that. And in that oneness, what madness, what insanity it would be to try and fight your own nature, to try and fight for beingness, to try and fight itself, to reject itself, to terrorize itself, to harm itself. It's insanity. That's the root of true kindness. It stops being kindness from the top down as something that we should do because we're nice people or spiritual people, something that I try to do, but I don't always get it right. It comes from the inside out. Yeah. So the journey is really one of waking up to who you are. From that place, there can be true relationship. Waking up to who you really are does not have to be a carrot dangled on a stick, the carrot of enlightenment, when you've meditated enough or gone to the top of a mountain and found the right guru and prayed enough and have good karma or released your karma. It's not a dangling on the stick. It's now. It's direct. It's available to every single human being that has the tenacity, courage, the willingness, the humbleness, because it's humble, because humbling and requires humility because it demolishes everything that you think you are. If you have the courage for that, then everything can change from the inside out.
One more thing. We're in mysterious times where things are changing on planet Earth. We're shifting ages. I think that's been recognized, that there's possible shifting of the ages, and we might be shifting into the Age of Aquarius. That shift is a shift from the dominance of the individual self to an era of collective consciousness. And if anything big is happening in our collective experience and our individual experience, it's that. And this that we're talking about relates directly to that. This could be an unusual conversation for 2020. By 3020, if the world continues in some kind of way and does go through an evolutionary change that's been pointed to by many, many, many people, and a lot of people are experiencing this shake-up, by 3020, this kind of relating from the depths could be the normal. And that's
I'm hoping
why
it's going to be by 2030, not 3020.
Yeah.
I don't know why you care, because it's already happening with you and me. But it's, maybe sooner. Who knows? There's a fast track. I'm just, throwing stuff out there that, if that galvanizes anybody, if this speaks to anybody, just a whisper, just a bit, it's worth, really planting the seeds of that and putting it into your soul, into your depths, into your being right now. And this time of transition, right now, not tomorrow, not next week. We're done where spirituality is a luxury. Done. That's in the past. That was then. That was when we all thought we had a world that was just going to continue in its safe way. That's done. We're in it now. We're in the dark zone. And in the dark zone, you matter, you matter, you matter, I matter. We're all individual cells of the global body that matters. Each individual cell in the body matters. It matters how you resonate. It matters what frequency you resonate at. It matters what your priorities is in life. And if your priority is to inquire into who you really are because you want to put that into the world, then that's the most important thing you could do. And everything else takes a second place. And then if you stumble in your life onto another who does a similar thing, well, then you're blessed. If not, you just do it anyway, because everybody is your intimate lover. Everybody is the beloved, everyone. Even the ugly ones, even the horrible ones, even the dangerous ones. It doesn't feel right, it doesn't sit right to the mind, but there we are. And if you can relate from that deeper and deeper and deeper place, then we're putting something fundamentally kind, fundamentally powerful into this world. And that's what changes things. And we on the ground are going to be the two people who change things. That's it.
Wow, this is so amazing. Could I ask you a question?
No.
So something that's arising is I'm wondering about your take on free will in all of this. Both of you speak so beautifully about self-inquiry and this willingness and this openness and this humbleness that it takes to really open to this. And how much of this do you believe is really in our hands, and how much of it is serendipity on some level? And what is that line for you? I would love to hear.
That's a delicate question, or a delicate inquiry. Let's say it doesn't come from will, it comes from willingness. Yeah, it doesn't come from the will, which is the will of self. I can do it, I will do it, I will overcome it, I will make it happen, I will, do X, Y, Z, and therefore there will be a result. It doesn't come from that place. It doesn't come from the will. It comes from a willingness. A willingness is an openness. It's an openness. It's an allowing. It's a deep longing to come home to true nature in every circumstance, in every interaction. It doesn't come from will. Yeah. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect, what you're talking about perhaps, or what you're asking, Sayde, is how isn't it grace that brings awakening? Is it something that we can work on? Is it something that we can progress on? Yeah, perhaps you're asking that, or that's part of the inquiry. Again, it doesn't come from the self or the ego self or the mind self that has an agenda or a belief or an idea that if I do this and this and this, I will make awakening happen. It doesn't come from the personhood. It comes from the honesty of a deeper inquiry, which ends up being a demolition project. Everything that you think you are, everything that is false, everything that arises from an inner divided state will come tumbling down. And the only true invitation in that is the invitation to be willing for that openness, to be willing for that falling apart, not a falling apart in your life, but a falling apart in your inner world, all the constructs of self, that you can be willing for. Everything else gets taken care of. Everything else is not according to your agenda. Yeah? So without the willingness to open to a deeper dimension, without the willingness to know your true nature and to fall into that, come what may, because the ego self, the mind self, the separate self will scream for its imaginary safety, imaginary platform of what it knows, its position. But if there's a willingness, then awakening will inevitably flower. You don't know when, you don't know how, but it will inevitably flower because that's the natural state. Yeah, that's the movement of consciousness coming to know itself through the human form. So is that free will? Or is it something else that is some greater will that is moving this? You could say that it's the end of personal will, and it's the birth of a divine will that moves through you. And as it moves through you, as it expresses itself, as it nudges itself through you, it's experienced sometimes, very often, as personal. It has to be, because it comes through the vehicle. But it's not the same as the ego will, the ego attempt to get anywhere. It's a very different feeling. It's a very different experience. It's as if life and the movement of life and the awakening of consciousness is just happening through me, as me. There's no me here doing it. It's happening through me as me. But I do, as a person, and a perceived person, have the choice to tighten, to close, to cling to my ego self at all costs, or to surrender. That's a choice that one has, to be willing to surrender in the midst of what wants to flower in you. So it's not a yes or no answer. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
I can speak to that as well a little bit. That willfulness is what is an activity of the self, which is what Amoda is pointing to, and I just want to affirm that that's the case. Willfulness is an activity of the self, and so at some point there has to be the willingness to release the willfulness and release the one who thinks they're doing it, or that they're being willful, or that I have power in this, or I have control over my destiny. You'd be surprised, when space starts coming and you get to see the mechanism that drives the self, that is the same mechanism that drives the self in you as it is in me, as it is in every single person. It's just got its own individual nuances depending on who we are and how we're brought up. But when you start to see that very mechanism, then you realize that how many of these qualities that we think we need for the drivers of the engine are things that we need to surrender. And willfulness is one of those things that we are called to surrender as we get deeper. Not first, because will might be driving some part of the engine. I'm determined. I'm a determined person. I prefer to call it resolve rather than will, because will has a kind of ramification about it. But resolve, to be tenacious, and resolve to actually get to the heart of the matter, to get deeper into it, to find out the truth, to look into myself until I come to the truth, is a matter of resolution. It's a resolve to do it. And that kind of brushes aside almost the willfulness. But if the willfulness is there, it has to be surrendered. And the very surrendering of the willful one, the one who wants to will, the self that needs to will this world into being, the one who's almost power hungry. We see it in the world with the power hungry tyrants that are running rampant around our world. Well, what's the difference? They're willful. They're radically willful. They're right. I'm going to do this, and nobody's going to stop me. I'm going to do this to anybody who steps in my way. So that's the will gone mad. But it can start somewhere very small within us. And the surrendering of that will is humbling that Amoda's talked about. It's exquisite and usually agony as well. It's like the dying of an entity. It's like when Neo unplugs from the Matrix, for those people who are old enough now to have seen it, when he unplugs. It's that agony that he goes through when the suctions come out as he's plunging down, when all of the things that have held him captive under the illusion that he was a free man are pulled out, and he goes down into the deep and ends up on the Nebuchadnezzar. And what happens? He has to come back into it. Not come back, he has to be revitalized, because it was all a dream. The entirety of his being was a dream. His existence was a dream. Same. That was not a story, that was the truth. That's an allegory of what actually kind of happened. So there is some aspect of will that's necessary, and then that too must go. Beautiful. A beautiful death.
So beautiful. Would you guys like to continue a bit more, or would you like to answer a couple of questions from the audience?
Let's have a couple of questions, yes?
Okay.
Yes.
So Lauren writes in, can one reach their highest potential outside romantic relationships, or is relationship the tool to access one's highest potential?
No, it's within you. It's within you. Relationship isn't the necessity here. The necessity is the relationship with your deepest self. Only then can you be the fullness that you really are. And then if relationship comes into your life and another comes into your life, something beautiful can be born from that. Something very creative can be born from that isn't to do with my satisfaction or my needs. But the primary relationship is with your innermost, with your true nature.
Thank you. And then we have Julia, who writes in, this is very beautiful and enlightening. I think that people can meet that type of love, recognizing that the other is myself when they truly love themselves. Therefore, they attract someone who mirrors that type of love. There's something I don't understand, though. When the ego dissolves and love comes from the beingness instead of from the personality, how can that feeling arise towards one specific person? I mean, would there still be a couple? If ego dissolves, wouldn't the love between them be addressed and felt for all people?
Yes, that's a really good question. Thank you for that. Well, I'm going to talk from direct experience, which is the only place I can speak from anyway. Well, first of all, I'm going to say that living awake consciousness, living through form, which is what it does, is always a paradox. It's an impersonal love that doesn't need love from the outside to fulfill me, but it's also personal because we live in a world of form. So that's what I meant earlier when I said in this kind of relationship, there's only one beingness dancing, one consciousness dancing through form. It is emptiness and form. It is one and it is two. The two are within the one. They're not separate. So from my personal experience, awakening, the dissolvement of ego self, the knot of ego that upheld a sense of separate me, came to an end in 2002 when I lived on my own. It was a singular experience. I was not in relationship at that time. From that point on, there was no need for a relationship. And I'd spent all my life looking for a relationship. Yeah, I was very much the one who needed love, needed to be loved in order to feel like a lovable person. Yeah, so something fundamentally changed in awakening. There was no need for love. It knew itself. I knew myself. It knew itself, yeah, because it wasn't personal, as love. There is no separation. It had merged. This one had merged with the totality of existence. So there was nothing to be gained and nothing that could be lost. The surprise was that sometime after that, not very long after, another form in the form of Kavi appeared in my life, but and something wanted to grow, but it didn't have the same quality of need in it. I didn't need him for anything. I didn't need him to love me. I didn't need to give him anything. It was a meeting that came from or arose out of love itself. So yes, there's a personal relationship that happened, but it didn't have the same, and still doesn't have the same agenda, and never has done for the past 20 years, of need or expectation or control, or the need for comfort or the need for safety. There's no needing to keep each other in a role so that I can feel comfortable or safe or secure. There is absolute freedom. That freedom doesn't mean it's impersonal. That freedom means that there is only one here. It's the freedom, the same freedom that is in me as me is in the relationship. It's a freedom that has no control in it. It's a love that is unconditional. So it's a very different quality. So that's the beautiful paradox. It can be absolutely fulfilled in itself, and it is fulfilled in itself. Therefore, the love doesn't come from him, but there's also a personal, but something else is born through that. And what's born through that is another, well, for us, it can be very, it's what's born through us is the teaching. That's what's been born. And that was totally unexpected. Yeah. That which has emerged over the past few years as the teaching, or the past however many years, 6, 7 years, has been born out of this open space of love, not as a theory or as a principle, but just an emanation of frequency that forms itself. Yeah. So it can be personal and impersonal. And of course, it's completely fulfilled. It doesn't, yeah, even if this relationship was not here, that same fulfillment is here. There's a certain joy, yeah, there's a certain joy and there's a certain playfulness when two forms can dance in that one, yeah? But it's unexpected. It's not needed. It's a surprise. It's an extra flower in this consciousness.
Oh boy. Yeah, I've got to speak to that, because I think the person who asked the question was right. That's why we've said all along that we don't really talk about relationship too much, because it's tailor-made to the exquisiteness and individuality of every person who encounters it. For some, they be an awakened person who goes through life sharing and spreading that awakening just from that place. And in our relationship, you see, there is I do believe that Amoda could have carried on and would have carried on teaching and have grown into the person that she is anyway. I have no idea what I would have done, what I would have become as a musician and a pretty crazy guy all those years back. I think that, you know, I don't want to get too much into roles here, into masculine and feminine, but there was men need something to serve. Men are seeking to serve something. Most of the world seems to be distorted into man, and I'm not speaking to women at the moment in that sense. Man seems to need to serve something, and if he can't find the true nature, his true nature, then inevitably he's going to be serving his ego self, tyrannical, demonic, addictive, overbearing, powerful, however it manifests. And obviously in a good way, you know, it's all sorts of good people, so it hasn't got just this terrible side to it, but it's lopsided, because that which is serving can end up so easily being a tyrannizer both of himself and of the world, if you like. But a man seems to be called to serve something. And what seemed to happen in this relationship, and I had no plan, no agenda, I've only, you know, it's just come into being kind of true in this relationship, was that because we didn't have the same kind of needs or the entanglements or those tentacles that I talked about last week, and they were somewhat in a way forcibly dissolved in me, because Amoda was a clean slate, a mirror. When I met her, then I was forced into the thing that I talked about earlier, which was a surrender of the willful ego. So the surrender in me took me to a place so deep within myself that I opened into a deep humility, which one would think would be a very weak place in a way, and it proved actually ultimately to be my greatest strength. And within that state of humble openness, I became the warrior that I've probably been all my life in waiting. And I discovered that my true service is to serve love, period. And what I found was that Amoda was the personification for me of love's voice into the world as I was going to find it. That was it. Not in any kind of special way, not in any egoic way, but just I was looking. There I am. I'm going to serve that. I'm going to serve a woman coming into the world at this time. And as you'll get to, those who get to know me will see that I'm an evolutionary. I believe in evolution, and I think we've had enough of the male tyranny that's been going on for centuries. And we need women to be put up in a wise women, real women, women who know themselves, not the emasculated women, but these women. And I saw in her eventually, somehow, I saw this, and I felt this in my core, and I decided as a man to serve that. And was that for himself? No, it wasn't. It was just coming from such a deep, integrated, open place that it feels like and felt like then, and still feels like the most natural thing in the world. There's a harmony between the two of us. There's a harmony that moves, the harmony of nature, the harmony of natural intelligence, of natural wisdom. Does it need to be in a relationship? Absolutely not at all. Is it in relationship? Yes, it is in this instance, but there's no teaching that says it's got to be this way or it's got to be that way. If it's coming through an individuation in their flowering way, beautiful. Be a beautiful flower. All we are is two come together as one in this kind of, you know, double-headed flower. That's all it is a double-headed flower. But doesn't mean anything really in and of itself. So there are a million different ways to climb the mountain, to praise God. Beautiful. But in this relationship, that's the bottom line. And I felt a little bit compelled to share that that's some of what is happening in here. And I'm extremely proud of it, because more and more men, as far as I'm concerned, need to stand up and put love highest, not high, highest. That's how we're going to facilitate the change that's going on.
Thank you, Kavi. Okay. All right, I'll go to the next question, if that's okay. All right, we have Sid, who says, Amoda Maa, when you talk about verticality, are you meaning that we need to go deep into our shadow first to then go up to connect fully to our divinity?
Well, certainly the shadow must be met if we are to stand as consciousness. Yeah? I don't see it as lower or higher. And really, I'm not using the word verticality to mean that. It's not, verticality isn't a dimension where this is the lower and this is the higher. When I say verticality, what I mean by that, the verticality of being, it means, I use that to contrast from horizontality, the horizontality of the ego self, which has a seeking mechanism in it. It's always seeking to run away from something it doesn't like and run towards something it wants to possess or own or does like. So the ego is never resting right here. The ego is always in agitation. The ego is always in movement. It's in defense or attack mode. It's in running away or running towards mode. Yeah, that's the craving and aversion mechanism, the seeking mechanism. It's never fulfilled in the stillness of now. When I say that's the horizontal, yeah, if you like. When I say vertical, I mean the eternal now. Yeah, the eternal now. There's no moving away, there's no moving towards, there's no past, there's no future. There's no fear, there's no hope. It's just here, now and now and now and now and now and now. That's what I really mean by vertical. Yeah, and then the other part of it, which is really a separate thing to the horizontal and vertical. Yes, if you're on a journey of truth, if you're on a journey of deepening into beingness, then all shadow energies within oneself must be met. A shadow energy is simply something that you have avoided or rejected in yourself. And what is it that you avoid or reject in yourself? It's a feeling. It's always the feelings that we can't handle, the feelings that we think are too difficult, too dark, too intense, too tortuous, too evil, or too overpowering. The feelings that we think will kill us. Yeah, we make an enemy out of feelings, and those feelings are usually from the past. We were too small or too powerless or too dependent when we were children, when we were babies, to feel the hurt, to feel the vulnerability, to feel whatever it is that was our experience. So we shut down and then we suppress it, and we learn to suppress it, or we're trained, conditioning to suppress it, tuck it away, don't cry, don't feel, don't be angry, don't do this, don't do that, don't feel that. So we tuck it away, we repress it, and that becomes the shadow bag. So then we're divided within ourselves. Yeah, we have qualities within ourselves, feelings within ourselves that we think are good, acceptable, spiritual, and so on. And then we have feelings that we think, we believe are bad, evil, a punishment, out to torment us. So we live in a divided state. Awakening is, or the journey of awakening, the process of awakening, inevitably includes the meeting of all energies within ourselves. That's our willingness to be present to what is here in me, in my experience. It's the willingness to be open enough to feel everything, this and this and this, without suppression, without rejection, without denial, without spiritual bypassing. That's where the willingness comes in. Yeah? And then it's like the shadows stop being shadows. There's nothing we have to hide from. There's nothing we have to avoid. There's clear seeing. We meet life, and life is always our experience of life, as openness. that's awakening. That's part of the awakening process. Yeah. So there's nothing in us that is divided. There's nothing that's avoided. So I hope that differentiates a bit between the shadow work, yeah, the whole journey of that, and the sort of verticality and horizontality.
Thank you, Amoda Maa.
I have one thing to say to that, because that's actually, I thank you for that. What was his name? Sid.
Sid, yes.
Yeah, I like that. I'll be writing a poem about that in the next couple of days. I found the divine in the mud that grows the lotus. Get your head around that.
Beautiful. Okay, I have a question here from Dylan, who's actually directing his question towards Kavi. And it is, what was the experience of peeling away your ego in the presence of your partner's clean slate in the beginning?
Great question. Tough. But it was offset by the fact that I'd already done quite a lot of work, and there'd been a kind of 2-year demolition project of the more tenacious defense structures that I was suffering from. And so when I came into the relationship with Amoda, there was a raw readiness, and I sensed something for me in that. So I think, I'm not sure whether I said it last week. So for instance, I'll tell this little story, Amoda, because I feel called to. After about 2 years, I think, we went to a cafe somewhere in London. And cafes were a bit of a trigger place for me, because of my father was Victorian and a very rigid kind of person who didn't want to be exposed in public. And I carried that with me, a sort of shame and an intolerance of other people's behavior. And I carried that unbeknownst to me, really. And in the cafe, it was about 2 years into the relationship, or maybe sooner, I'm not sure. And this was the time when I was talking about where we try and put tentacles around each other and collude with each other in these games, collusive games. Well, in this cafe, suddenly something came over me, and I felt my father's shame, but in me, I didn't recognize it as my father. And I got triggered, but not by anything that Amoda did, just by my own thoughts of intolerance towards her. She shouldn't be behaving like this. She shouldn't be doing this. It should be like this. I've got to control this situation. Oh my God, what's going to happen? And I think I spat something out at her. The absolute details are a little bit vague, but I think I spat something out at her, as if a kind of don't do, like my father would do, God rest his soul. Don't do that. And what happened was, and you know, it was grace in a way that I saw the vibration of what left me land on her, not as the person, but I saw, honestly, this is the living truth. I saw something that was like a sea anemone in the ocean that was wide open like that. And as this frequency hit it, it went, and it retracted a little bit. It diminished a little bit. It lessened a little bit. And in that moment, I saw how love dies. I saw how love dies when we just barter it, when we just play our games. And I remember that it lived with me for so long, because I vowed at that time, with the resoluteness that I just mentioned earlier, not a willfulness, because willfulness implies that I want to really, but I feel like I shouldn't. That's the trouble with will, whereas resolve comes from a deeper place. It was like, is that going to be my destiny, to be in yet another dysfunctional relationship where we're just playing these endless games over and over, and that's my life pattern there, the same as my father, the same as my brother, the same as everybody else. And I'm like, I'm not playing that game. That I have the resolve to meet myself fully. So when it happens again, I stay with it. I stayed with it. That it is the momentum there within me? Yes, it is. It was in there for a while. And I ate it in humility, in humility, in humility. There's a great thing of humility, because humility has humiliation in it. On the egoic level, we don't want to be humiliated, because that's the worst possible thing that could happen to the ego. But to the self that's deeper than that, humility opens up when we surrender the willful, righteous ego. And the doorway to humility opens up. And humility for men, as well as for everybody else, is an exquisite opportunity to be true. So I don't know, that answers some of it. Amoda wants to speak to that.
Yeah, may I just speak to that a little bit as well? Just to say that just to give a flavor of the dynamic, which was very well described there. You see, in that interaction, and in all interactions, or most interactions, definitely, certainly, and especially in the earlier days, you see, I as a person didn't have to do anything. I, as Amoda, the person, didn't have to say, "Ooh, that wasn't a very loving thing to say." I neither scolded him nor lauded my awakening over him, nor anything, nor guided him a different way, nor personally retracted. Amoda is still here. Amoda was still there as presence and openness in that. She felt it, but what really felt it was love itself. The frequency field of love is what retracted, and both of us felt it. Both of us felt the frequency field of love, which is vibrant, which is almost tingling, which is almost shimmering. Yeah, that's how love feels. It's a shimmering love. It has both stillness in it and a kind of shimmeringness in it. And that frequency field is what got slightly dulled in that moment. It was a dulling of that. You could say that joy, because joy is the natural arising out of love, the field of love. It's not a joy that has to do with, it's not caused by anything. It's a causeless joy. It's not to do with something that I have or something that I possess or something that I know or something that it's or by somebody else giving me something. It's a causeless joy. It's just the surface of the frequency field of love. And that's what just went, and we both felt it in the moment. In that moment, there was nothing I had to do, but also just be a witness to that. So if you like, love, that frequency field of love, we also call it the third body of love. Yeah. It's like a third body is created, a third frequency field, the personal there, the personal here, and a third body of love gets created, gets born out of this. It's like a holy trinity. Yeah. That does the work. And that's my personal experience in this relationship, is that I don't have to do anything. Love does it all. Which means that there's no person that has to battle with it. Of course, there's a human experience as well. Yeah, so we speak and we communicate and all of that. But essentially, it's not the personhood that is having to do anything, that is having to impose its will to make the relationship work or to make love grow or to do anything like that. And that's been a revolutionary and in some ways aspect and surprising, unexpected previously not known this dimension of love in relationship.
Yeah, that's very well said. I do. The result of this was because, you know, that it continued for me in various forms during this relationship, this struggle within myself. But the struggle was never within the relationship. It always ended up becoming, or was, my journey, you know, and she was able to mirror that, and out of that, such a deep surrender happened. And I, you know, if I'd have known that this was kind of possible many years ago, I would have thought, no, that's just ridiculous, that I could drop so many of these defensive strategies. And I have to say to people out there, listen, if I can drop all of these defensive strategies and be open and clear, you know, then anybody can, really. It's like, and then this joy that Amoda referred to, which has always been there, but now it just sort of is when there's no particular, when there's nothing buried under the carpet, there's nothing carried into each moment or each hour or each day, then it becomes like you say, an effervescent, tingling, you know, and alive, just an aliveness. It's not high end and it's not low end. It's actually with two of the most ordinary people in many ways that you could imagine. And we've got this super ordinary state in some sort of ways, but our next door neighbors just know us as Kavi and Amoda. It's just like, but there's this constant bubbling stream that doesn't actually need to be fed anymore. It doesn't need to be reached. It's there permanently, and that's a blessing. And that's for me. I give thanks that happened. And did it require some work? She's worked so hard on herself in the past before I came onto the scene. You wouldn't believe it. Have I worked hard? Boy, have I worked hard. You know, I've been through such stuff. And, you know, is this the result of that? I have no idea. I just know that, you know, if you want it, you keep the resolve to keep deepening, keep deepening, keep deepening.
Thank you so much. Shall I go to another question?
Yeah, we've got time for one or two more, I think.
Okay, so Wendy is asking, what about relationships when your partner struggles with addiction?
See, these questions are very difficult because they're so nuanced, aren't they?
Yes.
Go on.
What can we say to that without having a deeper dialogue? I mean, all these questions really require an intimate conversation. That's how we usually work, so that we can explore, you know, the truth of the conversation and not just conceptual. There's no set answer to anything. I'm only going to say two things to that very simply. One is the relationship to addiction that the other has, is a relationship with themselves. It's their responsibility to investigate that. It's not your responsibility as the partner to do the work for them. Yeah, it can only be done within. That other person, your partner, whoever it is, has to be willing to investigate what the driving mechanism, what the motivation for that addiction is, and to investigate, to ask themselves, are they willing to not follow that addictive mechanism? Yeah, to see what is the imagined fulfillment that is being received. Yeah, and is that satisfactory? Is that truly true fulfillment, or is it temporary? And in which case, if it's temporary, am I, because it's always an internal, a personal journey, am I willing to know what is more ever present than the temporary fulfillment from the addictive process? So that's an individual journey, and that's I'm only answering it very simply. It has much more breadth and depth in that dialogue and in that investigation. For the person who's in relationship with somebody who's addicted to whatever it is, the inquiry is, can I honestly be with this? Can I honestly meet this? Can I honestly meet the other without judgment, without control, without the need for them to be anything other than the way they are? And if I'm not, why am I in this relationship? Yeah, so again, there's many more layers and subtleties to that investigation. But what I'm really pointing to is that each individual has to go on their own personal investigation as to what is it that I'm expecting? What is it that I'm needing? What is it that I'm wanting? And what is my deepest truth in this, in other words, and so on and so on. Yeah.
Yeah. I have been through addictions myself, so I understand that all addictions are A, to do with the self, and B, come from a place of woundedness and trauma, and something that's asking to be expressed within that person. And ultimately the ego self is always addicted to something, and only ultimately letting go of the mechanism itself brings any lasting and true and deeper peace. That's my own personal experience. I don't think I'm the only one, but that's just the way it is. Meanwhile, you have to, the person who is addicted has to meet it, keep on dealing with it, and looking for a deeper inquiry into what is it that I'm really addicted to? What is it that I'm really trying to avoid? And if they've got that capacity to that within relationship, then the partner has the opportunity to meet them as they do that. And if not, then it's a difficult situation. I understand how difficult that is for both for the experiencer and the witness, if you like, the partner. Really not easy, not an easy subject to unravel in 4 minutes on a so take heart.
Okay, there's 2 more questions. Is that okay with you guys? We don't have to finish right at 30 if you're okay with that.
Okay, we've got a date with bedtime.
Okay, that's great.
But we can take these 2 questions and then that'll do it. Let's see where we go.
All right, sounds great. So this one is actually from last week. I just kept it since we didn't get to answer it. I don't have the person's name, but the question is, I keep on finding myself absorbed in my spouse's goals. I do want to help him, and I always end up working for his goals only and have no energy to pursue my own goals. How do you keep that energy for yourself? I feel like I'm losing my identity every time he's near me.
Well, once again, I point the questioner to the early part of today's conversation, and I think the early part of last week's conversation is, what is your motivator? What is motivating you? What is driving your need for a relationship? Your need to be in relationship? Is it to be loved? Is it to be taken care of? Is it to be whatever it might be? Safe. Because if what you can be honest with yourself about that, and that honesty can be devastating. It's devastating to the ego self. Yeah. Then you can start to see more clearly the strategies that are playing out in relationship. This is a strategy. I will help you. I will help you with your goals whilst abandoning my own desires or impulses or deeper longings. Why? Why? Because I need you to stay in this relationship in order for me to feel loved, or something like that. That's where radical, penetrating, devastating truth, self-honesty, self-exposure, exposing yourself, exposing your true, the mechanisms that drive your life, your behaviors, exposing that to yourself. That starts the process of dismantling all the false strategies which create a prison in your mind, a prison in your heart, and a prison in your relationship, and a prison in your life. Yeah? How can you be who you are? Can you be free to be who you are in relationship? Because if you can't be free to be who you are in relationship, it's not relationship. It's a prison. It's an agreement. It's a contract. We have to unravel all contracts. So we have to start the investigation. Investigation must start. Why am I? What do I need from you in return? What is the contract I've made with you in which I help you to achieve your goals? Then I'm getting something back in return. But what I'm getting back in return is imprisoning me and diminishing me, rather than bringing me into the truth of who I am, from where we can truly relate.
Thank you. Okay, so the last question was from Maya, and it is, how do you recommend to relate with physical and emotional pain in the heart that prevents feeling kindness and love?
May I?
Yes, you may.
How do I relate to?
How do you recommend to relate with physical and emotional pain in the heart that prevents from feeling kindness and love?
Okay, so first of all, the primary relationship is to the pain in your heart. Yeah. The primary relationship is to meet what is here as pain. What was the other thing? Pain and?
So it's physical and emotional pain in the heart.
Physical and emotional pain, yeah. Okay.
Kindness and love.
So first of all, the relationship is to this. How can I meet this pain, this physical pain, this emotional pain? How can I meet this with tenderness? How can I meet this with kindness? You can't meet anyone else with kindness unless you can meet what is here in your experience, directly in your innermost, in your energetic matrix, in your energetic field. If you cannot meet that with tenderness, then you cannot meet anyone else or the world with tenderness. So it has to start. That's why the primary relationship is with self, not with ego self, but with the self that is deeper than that, the deeper self. And part of that process is the meeting of all darkness, yes, seeming darkness, pain, the pain body, yeah, physical pain, emotional pain. There's a contraction there. There's something that hasn't been met before, that there's a fear of meeting. Come towards that, welcoming it, welcome it in, welcome it like a tender child, like a little child, into the openness of your heart, First, that relationship. When you can meet everything in your experience in tenderness, in kindness, openness, in acceptance, then tenderness and kindness towards others and towards the world will be natural. It'll be a natural byproduct. Yeah. So start from the inside out, not from the outside in. That's why in the end, it doesn't matter whether you're in relationship or not. None of that matters. It's the natural outcome. The primary relationship is with deepest self. And the deepest self is often clouded by emotional pain, because that's where we have armored ourselves and contracted because of past pain and suppressing of feelings.
When I was in a previous relationship, in a very dysfunctional situation, my then partner used to say to me that I had guards around my heart, and that the only time I let them out was when I'd had a drink. There was a stage when I'd had too much to drink, where the guards became insane, but there was a certain point where I softened up just enough to let the guards down so that something real could be shown, something real could be felt. And that's a memory that's lived with me, you know, ever since. I've remembered what that meant, because at some point on the journey, not the journey of relationship, this is just to reiterate what Amoda said, but some journey of the going into the deepest self. If you want awakening, at some point there's armoring around the heart, and it will need to be met. And the willingness to meet it is the softness and the tenderness. And you can't get straight to the kindness, because most people come from screwed up families with dysfunctional ancestry that we've inherited time after time after time. It goes back, way back, way back. We've all got this kind of wounding. It wasn't directly in our parents, it was in the ancestors before them and before them. And we are the wound carriers and the wound bearers of our ancestry. And so at some point, the armoring around the heart that we've used as a strategy for survival, which is a very good thing, because I think when we're young, we need that strategy for survival, but unfortunately it enslaves us. And what seemed like such a good idea to have the casing around the heart ends up being the very thing that Amoda points to, which is the prison. And at some point, we have to meet the guards at the heart, and we have to say, are you real? Do you need to stay there anymore? Can I open up? And that usually requires a lot of grief, a lot of anger, a lot of tears, and some distress, and a deep dive into, and maybe a process that we need to go through. But you can't have awakening, you can't have the kind of a relationship that we're pointing to unless the heart and the armoring of the heart is actually softened around and allowed in, primary. It's almost like a ipso facto. It has to happen. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you both so much for joining us. It's been.
I'm going to read a poem, Sadie, before we finish.
Wonderful. Okay.
I never miss an opportunity these days, and I do want to encourage people to join my poetry page again. This one is called, it's short, This True Relating. This true relating is not theory. It is a living reality, a true experience, not a dead thing that we have achieved and now play out as though relationship were a goal we achieved. It is a living, breathing, ongoing journey in which we are both fully alive all the time, always meeting each other and ourselves in the presence of now. It may sound extraordinary, but in many ways it is ordinary. It is just true and open, no drama, no stories, nothing overlaid on reality, transparent and aware, considerate and kind, and willing to just be there, come what may.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you so much for these two amazing series that we've been able to spend with you. It's been so beautiful. I really hope we can do more, and we're so grateful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I would like to thank everybody. I'd like to thank you, Sadie, and the Unify team. You know, you guys are doing such good things, and we don't go on and share anything with very many people. We keep ourselves to ourselves and do our work. But there was such a resonance when Amoda did that those broadcasts with you earlier, and so then this just seemed like the right thing to do. And so I really thank you, and I thank everybody at Unify, and I also thank everybody for turning up and being willing to listen to this. Some of this might seem like crazy talk or impossible to achieve, but I truly believe that we are in the shifting sands of the age. And if you go away with nothing from this, know that we're in the shifting sands of the ages, and what you are, what you resonate at, really matters. And you have the choice to buy into the fear or to deepen into the truth of love, not the superficial love that people sell and buy, but the truth of love. And yes, it does mean inquiring, and yes, it does mean opening up that heart, but out of that, something is there for us, something there is there for us all. And I serve that, and I would love other people to say, I serve that as well, because that's the only thing I can see that's of any meaning in this crazy world. So that's what I say.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you both so much again. Wishing you a beautiful rest of your day. And take care, everyone else on Unify. Thank you so much for joining us.